All right, so I want to thank everybody for taking a little time out of your day to go through this workshop that we've put together. A collaboration between IMBA and NICA to really talk about where our missions may have common ground and how your local mountain bike advocacy organization can work together with NICA within your community to help establish new trails, better trails, fill experience gaps, meet community needs, all those sorts of things. So we wanted to make sure that everybody kind of understood where the missions kind of cross and had some common ground, and provide you guys with some resources and tools and some things to think about when we talk about expanding mountain biking in your community. So really wanted to start off with what our missions are. And once we start to talk about the missions, you'll start to see where those overlaps can possibly be with IMBA and NICA. Knowing that if you're with a grassroots advocacy organization, your mission may not be exactly the same as IMBA's, but knowing that it's gonna be somewhat similar, and it will still probably have some overlapping consistencies with NICA. But of course, IMBA's mission is to create, protect, and enhance great places to ride mountain bikes, with a focus on more trails close to home and increasing the quantity of mountain biking accessible trails. And it's a little bit of a deviation from what it used to be, which was primarily experience-based. So we went from mountain bike trail experiences to really kind of focusing on a sense of place for mountain bikers, really understanding where you come from and taking pride in your community, pride in the trails that you have, and motivating local champions to actually advocate for more and better trails in their community. So that's really kind of the bedrock of our mission. And so Phil Wadner is with NICA. He is also on the call. And Phil, if you want to take it for the NICA mission.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. So at NICA, we build strong minds, bodies, character, and communities through cycling. And our vision is that every youth is empowered to be a part of a thriving and engaged cycling community. So I am the program manager for our Teen Trail Corps program, which is our advocacy-oriented program that's really aims to get kids out giving service and introducing them to the world of advocacy. So for us, advocating for trails is a clear example of character development and accomplishing our mission through mountain biking.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. So as we move through this presentation, Phil will have a few things to talk about. And also on the call, we'll have Tom Nelson with the Northeast Alabama Bicycle Association to talk about a project, and also Adam Cruz with the Alabama NICA League to talk a little bit about how they're working together. But what we want to get out of this workshop is we want to familiarize you and potentially local champions within your community on what the process is for creating community trails, and not just creating those community trails, but figuring out where and what would have the most impact in your community. I think one of the places where a lot of our partnering IMBA local partner organizations and other grassroots organizations, where their mission really kind of crosses with NICA, is increasing that participation portion of mountain biking. So helping communities understand where they are and what the process is to get from what you have to maybe a more desired trail system or a more desired experience. We definitely want to familiarize you and your local champions with that process. We also want you to know and utilize all the tools and resources that both IMBA and NICA would have available for you to use to help accomplish your goals within your community. And also having that knowledge and those tools, using those to empower you and your local champions to understand where they are in the trail development process, but also how to move on to that next step and how to take that next step with your community partnerships. And so with that, we really wanted to jump right into a case study with Tom Nelson and Adam Cruz to talk a little bit about the McClellan Trails project in Anniston, Alabama, and kind of what their goals were kind of across the board with NIBA, NICA, and the community. So Tom, do you want to take it from here?
Sure, Adam. Happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me. A little background. I'll start with a little bit about, well, our goals. And we wanted to create some trail systems because we're fortunate that we have Coldwater Mountain in our area, which is an IMBA Broads Ride Center, and it's a great riding venue, but it's not conducive for the beginner or for families to get involved. And we were needing some trails that were more open to people to come in with lower abilities. We were also wanting to get families involved, to bring the community involved. And we also had here locally Fort McClellan, which was closed in 1999. And so we had a 10,000 acre piece of property that needed to be redeveloped. And so we started looking at building some systems. In the back of my mind, if we were going to build a trail system, I wanted to build one that was going to be a perfect venue for a NICA race and to get on the NICA race calendar here locally, because one, it brings a couple thousand people to town, and it's great for economic development. And it also is great for our local teams to be able to practice that, and with the goal of eventually landing the state championship here. So NIBA was founded in 1992. And it was just a few years after IMBA and SOBA were formed, but we were formed as an independent bike club. And it was both for road cycling and mountain biking. And it was always been looking at trying to put on events and bring people to our area. We are located at the end of the Appalachian chain. We have two wilderness areas right next to us. Chiao Mountain, which is the highest point in Alabama, is located here. And the first event we created was the Chiao Challenge, which is a century ride that goes up over Chiao Mountain and back. And it was been a very, very great race for our particular area. We just recently completed our 29th edition of it, and we had 1,389 people for a weekend for that event. We've expanded the event to include an ultra, which is a 200-kilometer event with 13,492 feet of climbing. It has about a 50 to 60% completion rate. If you sign up for the ultra and don't complete, because everybody completes it, gets a special finisher shirt. The ones who don't complete it, the shirt is burned and you get the ashes, along with a little coupon for a reduction in price to try again the next year. 2015, we started a 3-day mountain bike festival, Coldwater Fat Tire Fest. And then this coming spring, we're going to have our first gravel event, the Ammo Aswoven. We bought the rights to that event for one that had been here locally. NIBA was instrumental in getting Coldwater Mountain started. In 2010, Thomas and Rhett from SORBA reached out to us about becoming a chapter, and in 2010, NIBA became a chapter of SORBA and an IMBA local group. And through Tom's efforts in working with the Alabama Department of Economic Tourism and all, we were able to get an RTP grant, and NIBA put in the slave labor, I should say, I guess, for the matching part. We were able to get the first 10-mile loop, which included the bomb dog descent on Coldwater, which opened in 2012. The city of Anniston saw its benefit, and at that point in time, put in $400,000, which was leveraged to another $2 million with RTP grants, and we now have the 40-mile trail system that is IMBA, that is the Coldwater. So we have all kinds of things here, but we were really lacking in having that trail that was for the beginner. Adam, you on?
I don't know if Adam's made it on or not.
Okay. Well, Adam Crew is the director for the Alabama NICA group. Alabama NICA was formed in 2015. When it was first formed, we had 3 local teams in the initial group here in our footprint. NIBA encompasses about a 5-county area, but they were now have well, I forget how many, this large numbers, 50, 60 different teams in the area, and has grown by leaps and bounds, continues to grow. They have 5 races. They have a prologue, which used for seeding. And then they have the first one this past year was at Knuckle Falls or Black Creek, which also falls within the footprint of NIBA. And from there, they have one at Oak Mountain, which unfortunately this year a tornado hit the area about the week of, and they had to actually cancel that race. But there's one in Tualaca, down in Auburn, and then one up at the Rocket and Space Craft Center in Huntsville. The league continues to grow. It's been very, very successful. And they're, like I say, they're probably now approaching 750 athletes in the program. That kind of brings us to how we came to getting the trail system we have at McClellan. In 2017, NIBA joined with Anniston's Parks and Recreation Department, and we were going to create a youth cycling initiative to open up mountain biking to the underserved community, to diversify our sport and to reach out, to a segment of our population who was not able to get into mountain biking. We were able to get a grant from our community foundation, and we purchased 12 specialized rock hoppers. We added that to a fleet of 14 Fuji hybrid bikes that NIBA Sorba had already donated, and we're at our community centers. And so our goal was to initially, reach out to 5th and 8th graders from our community centers, and with a 2-year plan to establish a NICA mountain bike team at Anniston High School. At the very, very first session, we had 25 youth participate. There up in the front is Stephen Folks. At the time, he was the Parks and Recreation Director, and he's now our city manager. He was a retired drill sergeant from the Army, had actually served at Fort McClellan when he was in the Army. And he's a pretty good disciplinarian, but this was the first time, our first group together, bringing some kids that never have experienced mountain biking before. This is Patrick Wigley. He's the owner of one of our local mountain bike shops. And he's kind of going through showing these kids how to fit helmets. And the gentleman standing next to him was the first one we were asked for a volunteer to jump up, because he was so excited wanting to get into in this program. And the thing about the kid, had never ridden a bicycle before. And Darren Sims, who's one of our vice presidents of the club, worked with this kid, and by the end of the day, we had him riding the bike. And to see the smile on that kid's face was just, the rewards were just astronomical. We had the kids out here on some property that belonged to the city, and there was a Parks and Recreation had an area out there. And so we took them out and we let them ride around. And so they rode around the area. This was an old pecan orchard. Let them ride around some little gravel roads for a little while and let them get used to that. And then we took them off onto the grass and let them ride for there, get a little bit together and get their feet together. And then eventually down the road was an old abandoned BMX track. And we went down there and let them ride a little bit around that area. But it became obvious to us that we needed to have a really good track for them to ride, a place for them to ride there that they had access to. Because even though Coldwater Mountain was right next to their community, it might as well have been in Miami for them to get up there and utilize that type of facility. So we started looking at how we could build a trail. What would be a good trail to build? And if we were going to build a trail, we wanted to build one that would eventually be great for NICA, and maybe could host a NICA event, because at that point in time, NICA was active here in Alabama. We were not on the series, and we wanted to be on it. And so I reached out and to Eddie Fryer, who at then was a director at that point in time. I think now Eddie's a director up in Idaho. And I asked him to come, and I went there and showed him some of the property we're looking at, wanting to build a trail. And it was a great place for a trail. But the issue was, where we could be parking enough people, because he says, these events are going to draw 2,000. They're growing by leaps and bounds, and we need to be able to park at that point in time a minimum of 600 cars. But the way it's growing, within a short time, we need to be able to park like 1,000 cars. And so it wasn't going to work out right, that given area. And so I'd sit there and we started driving around, and right next to this area, within a half mile from where we were, was Fort McClellan. So I drove Eddie out to Fort McClellan to take him out to show him some property that had been cleared. And as we're driving down what's called Summerall Road, we're passing where the soccer fields were. And there's all these large parking areas. And it's where the city of Madison had created their recreational apartment, the softball fields, soccer fields, were all in that given area, but there was a huge swath of property back behind it. And Eddie said, "What's back there?" Well, after that, I started looking around and reaching out to McClellan to see what was out there. And at that time, nothing was there. And it just happened about, a few months after this, McClellan Development Authority, Freeman Fight, who was on the board, had the idea of taking some money that they had to build some mountain bike trails. Now, Fort McClellan was a fort. It was active for some 82 years. It was closed in 1999. But the McClellan Development Authority is a group its whole purpose is to redevelop that fort. And their goal is to put themselves out of business. It's a master plan community. It's got has a industrial park. And in that industrial park, we have companies that are supporting the automotive industry. Here in Alabama, we have a Honda plant, we have a Hyundai plant, we have a Volkswagen plant, there is a Mercedes plant. And so there are companies that have been developing or putting businesses out there that support and build parts and different things for some of the car industry. Like I said, the city has moved its primary recreational facilities out there. Jacksonville State has an adjunct campus out there. U.S. Homeland Security operates the Center for Domestic Preparedness out here. And so it's one that's been working and going around to develop, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. This is some pictures from the early on. As you can see there in World War I, it was used for train artillery during Korea, in Vietnam, World War II. It's been a very, very active plant. It used to house the Women's Army Corps. It was, like I say, the chemical warfare, and it's the only live agent training facility in the United States. And today, this is where the Center for Domestic Preparedness brings in first responders from all across the country to come and train and learn how to deal with biological agents, chemical agents, in case of terrorist attack, and how they can deal with it. And so it's a very, very active port or active facility, but there's still a lot more things to do. When Freeman Fight, who on the board, talked to them about putting mountain bike trails, and he reached out to me and wanted to get my thoughts about it. And he told me, he was going to ask for about $600,000. And he had a section of property that he was wanting to build on, was in a different area, and got my thoughts about it. And I said, well, if you want to make an impact, we need to build a trail that's going to be conducive for NICA, conducive for a NICA race event that we could land. It needs to be in an area we have plenty of parking. And we took it to the board. The board agreed to do it in 2018. I think in 2019, the trail system opened. In 2020, we hosted our first NICA race. The trails were expanded in 2020. And here is when it was first opened, showing the ribbon cutting. And we had representatives from our county commission, from our city government, from the MBA and local NICA writers were there. And we opened that thing in, like I say, 2019. And 2021, it expanded, and it's expanding again this given summer for third phase. So they've already spent 600,000 towards trails, and they're actually ready to put some more into the system. This particular trail system is opened up things that we didn't have before. It didn't have that beginning trail. And currently, at this past year, we had 30,000 riders participate in a 12-month period. I'm sure COVID had partly to do with that. People had looking for things to do. But the first year was like 20,000. This last year was 30,000. It's been great for ride things. It's a perfect venue for a NICA event. The trail was developed in such that people could walk out and see the riders in different areas, not just, at the start and finish line. They can walk out in the system and be able to see them pass at multiple spots and see the kids ride. It's also great for families. And can you back that one up, Anthony? Sorry about that. It's gotten a lot of families involved, and that they're taking their entire family out there to ride. People had ridden before or buying bikes, and they're getting the kids on the bikes and taking them out there learning to ride. And so it's really opened up and brought a lot of people who had not ridden mountain bikes into it, because if they ever went out to cold water the first time, they didn't go back the second time initially until they got some skills. But this has been a great to be able to bring these people into the fold. We have trail counters on our system, so we're able to keep track, and that's how many people are out there. Jacksonville State has launched a trail research project. So they have a field school on the Fort property where they can teach classes in trail building and development. Ross Martin, who is on our board, he's a geology professor, and he works on looking at different trail surfaces and durability of trail surfaces. And so they're using this to take students out there to work with them and learn about some recreational trail development. This is looking at some maps of there on the left-hand side. It's a map of Anniston, and there up on the upper right, you see MBT, that's the McClellan Bicycle Trails on that 10,000 acre former fort facility. And there on the south end of town, this CWM is Coldwater Mountain, which is a 4,000 forever wild piece of property where you have 40 miles of trails. And then there in the center, WCC is Wiggins Community Center. And just yesterday at the Anniston City Council meeting, they approved there's a 200 acre parcel of land next to this community center where there's a small group. Well, it's not a small group. There's 40 kids every Thursday afternoon riding bikes there from range from 4 and 5, up to 12. And we're going to, NICA is applying for a digging grant to create a trail on that 200 acres for them to have some systems to ride. On the right side is our bike pedestrian plan, and this is some of the connectivity. We have a rails to trail, which is the NICA trail, which comes from the north side of Anniston all the way to the Georgia line, which connects with the Silver Comet. So you can do a rails to trail from Anniston all the way to Atlanta. We're extending that in through town, and it's going to be the connectivity, which is going to connect the McClellan Trail system into downtown and even to the Coldwater system. And then with our shared rails, shared trails and shared roads, it's able to connect these together where people from the different neighborhoods can able to access and use the NICA trail to ride out and get onto the different trails. The Coldwater Mountain, and it's where it's going to finish in our trail. It's going to be within less than a mile from the Amtrak station. And the goal is eventually you can take an Amtrak into Anniston, jump off, ride up to the trail system, ride around, spend some time downtown, and get back on and go back to Atlanta. So this is all part of our plan to connect things together, get our community connected together, and make this great asset we have available to the entire community. One of the other things that we have done as a community is this is actually in 2020, we were not able to do this past year because of COVID, but we hosted a block party for all of the teams, all of the athletes, all their coaches, and we brought them into downtown. We closed off a street, set up a tent there in front of the NICA bike headquarters, and had a barbecue and fed about 1,000 people from athletes and coaches, and brought this in an area for them to come together. These kids to see each other at the races, but they never got a chance to hang out. And this was after they came in and had their setup on their Saturday and did their pre-ride Saturday night when they had nothing to do. We hosted this block party to give these kids a chance to get together and see each other. We had set up a stage, had live music for them, and allowed them to sit there and have that time to socialize and get to know one another. Very successful, supported by the entire community. We got funding from the county commission and from the McClellan Development Authority and from the Chamber of Commerce to help put this on. Another thing that we do here locally is that we do a mountain grout, a program with NIBA where we give grants to the local NICA teams. And for the last 5 years, we've given about $10,000 in grants towards the teams to help cover some of their administrative expenses. And right now we're up to 5, and we're starting our 6th team in response for that grant. Then the athletes do come and work some of our other events and have a little sweat equity and serve as volunteers at Coldwater Fat Tire Fest and also at the Chi Hog Challenge. That's what I got for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. So we heard a little bit about what's happening in Anniston, Alabama and the McClellan project. And, you know, the community and Tom did a ton of work to get that project launched and to get it to where it is today. And so at this point, you might or might not be asking yourself how you can get a project like that accomplished in your community. And so going to start really at the beginning because we wanted to kind of define what the process was and the life cycle is of a trail project. So, you know, the advocacy part of it is extremely important. So letting your community and your constituents know what the importance of trails actually are and why they're needed in your community, you know, that's the advocacy part of it. That's what's going to get people excited about potential trails in their community and really gets people on board and buy-in on what your high level goals are with trails in your community. Then once you get the community on board with the idea of trails and how important they are to the community, then you can move on to the planning process for trails. Again, this is sort of high level. We'll go into a little bit more detail on this process in a couple of slides, but the planning part of it is extremely important. It's great to have high level goals and have a vision, but until you apply a plan to that vision and so that you can effectively execute it, it's really just kind of something that sits on a shelf. So really, we want to make sure that that you guys understand what the planning process is and how to utilize it to get what you need. Once you have everybody on board and you have a plan, then you need to fund for your final projects. Some of you may have been on the workshop that we had earlier today with our government affairs team to talk about federal funding. Federal funding is great. It's a great resource to get a lot of dollars allocated toward a project, but understanding that there are steps that you need to take to get to the funding part of it. And then of course, that funding rolls into the actual projects that you have. And so instead of thinking about the life cycle of a trail project as linear with a starting and ending point, it's always going to be circular. You're always going to be advocating for new and better trails. You're always going to be planning for what's happening in the future, and you're always going to need funding for those projects. And so, the advocacy part of it, that happens, at every level. So national, regional, and local. What we do at a national level trickles down to the regional level, and then of course down into the local level. Planning is done mostly at the regional and local level. Funding also happens at all three of those levels, and your projects are going to be mainly regional and local projects. And so at IMBA, the way we kind of look at these this process a little more in depth is, so the advocacy portion of that life cycle of a trail starts with access. So ensuring that the community has the proper and needed access for your goals and for the opportunities that you want to provide. And then education. Education can kind of be plugged in just about anywhere in this process. But what we found is a lot of times when you're working for access and you're working through your advocacy efforts, that education becomes extremely important, particularly for those in the community who may not understand mountain biking. They don't understand the lingo. They don't understand the different types of experiences that it can provide. So really making sure that that your community has all of the resources and education needs so that those trail champions who may be outside of mountain biking can really help run with your project and be an incredible asset to getting projects on the ground. Assessment, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So assessing kind of what you have on the ground, what opportunities are available, and what your constraints are, and what the community sees as valuable in trails. Like that type of assessment is going to be extremely important. And we're going to definitely go in depth about the assessment process. Of course, after you assess and take inventory of what you have and what you need, that rolls into funding requests. So having funding for planning, design, and construction is extremely important. But having donors, having foundations and grantors understand that you have a vision, that you have a goal that's prioritized and achievable, really helps in getting that funding. So understanding that the funding portion, again, can come in different parts of this process, but really where you're going to start to run into needing quite a bit of funding is prior to the planning and design portion of the trail ecosystem. And so once you get into the planning and design, that's really going to be project specific. So it might relate to just a specific park instead of the entire community. But having a professional plan and understanding how to execute that plan is extremely important. And then, of course, funding may come in again right here before you start to provide funding for construction. It could be a volunteer built project. It could be a professionally built project. It could be a hybrid build where volunteers help alongside professional trail builders. But that creating the trail experience is the next step in that process. And then, of course, your long-term stewardship. We did a poll a couple of years ago and asked organizations if they saw themselves as more advocacy organizations or stewardship organizations. And surprisingly, the vast majority of organizations that we polled saw themselves as mainly stewardship. And so you can see that stewardship is really kind of the last step and only one component in the entire process of getting trails on the ground. So what we hope to see is more groups start to see themselves as advocacy and stewardship organizations as opposed to just one or the other. So when assessing the trail experiences in your community, kind of understanding what the community needs are and what type of value different people in the community place on trails becomes extremely important. And keeping those concepts more high level really helps open the doors for a lot of experiences or opportunities that, you know, a lot of times we don't actually see. So when you're advocating for trails, it could be for, you know, to increase the variety or progression. If you're working with an economic development authority, they may have trails. The value of their trails may be more along the lines of improving quality of life or economic revitalization. For some other community groups, it might be equitable access. For land managers, it might be addressing overuse. For NICA, it might, you know, if you're a NICA team, it might be increasing participation. So understanding what value your different community partners and your different trail users place on trails will really help put into place a trail system that's usable by as many people as possible in the community and really meets the needs of what your community has in mind for what that trail project and what those trails should be. So one way to understand what the needs are for trails in your community is to put together a feasibility study. So we're going to be sharing an example of a feasibility study that we worked on in Omaha, Nebraska. And so a couple of things that were addressed in this feasibility study is, so the local NICA league in Nebraska was this emerging league. And in Omaha, they had an emerging team that in its first year, you know, had quite a bit of participation on a conglomerate team. But at the end of that year and following with their second season, they had more than 20 riders drop out of NICA, mainly due to the fact that they were having to travel 30 to 45 minutes to get to practice venues, to get to race venues. So it became an access issue. They weren't able to access trails in an easy way. And so the NICA League really wanted to find opportunities for practice venues. And so in working with their local IMBA chapter, the local IMBA chapter also had this goal of expanding participation in mountain biking. And so they saw an opportunity to combine their efforts and really focus on, okay, if we're gonna attract new riders, do we want to just look at one park and say this is where we're going to create a practice facility? Or they could have taken a more long-term look at what the community needed and said, okay, we can address the issue of these 20 riders, but what if the following year we have 40, 60, 80, 100, 120 riders? And now, you know, instead of tackling these projects one park at a time or as they pop up, they decided that it would be much better to put together a feasibility study to really prioritize what their growth would be and do it in a more sustainable way. And so just want to link real quick to this study and talk about it just a little bit. And hopefully this pops up quickly and everyone can see it. All right, Tom, team, can everybody see that?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. All right, thank you. All right, so the community of Omaha decided to have Trail Solutions put together this feasibility study. And so the goal of the project was really to engage youth and increase the equity and access that the youth in the community have. And so they wanted to find locations for trails. They wanted to find locations for skill development. They wanted to find locations and opportunities to serve maybe underrepresented communities and populations so that everybody had equal access to some mountain biking facility. And so they looked at a lot of different things. So not only what types of trails that they could put in, but what types of projects that they could tackle. So so in prioritizing what the trail projects were going to be, they looked at a variety of things within the community. So there were public meetings, there were surveys, a number of things that were done ahead of time prior to a lot of the GIS analysis that was put into this feasibility study. So on this map, you can see that not only are high school NICA teams visible on this map, but also the community organizations. And so what we were able to do with this map was overlay census data and some other community data to really understand where would we have the most impact in developing youth and creating equitable access for everyone in the community. And so you can see that, you know, the eastern or the western and kind of southern portions of the map have a lot of NICA teams, but over on the eastern part of that map, you'll see there are a lot of community organizations, but no NICA teams available. And so we started to see some opportunities there where we understood that, you know, a lot of those community organizations were there to serve underrepresented populations. And so then we started to see a gap in what was accessible and doable for NICA teams versus what was accessible and doable for communities that had little to no access to mountain biking facilities. So, so based on that information and based on the data that we collected, we're able to put together kind of this flow chart of how we could implement specific trail projects within the community, and came up with this scoring initiative to figure out what were the opportunities that were available, what types of mountain biking experiences and projects could we put in different areas of the community, and how feasible and how implementable those opportunities were. And so what we came up with was, based on this data, a nice priorities map. So you can see that the darker kind of magenta areas that turn to purple, the purple areas are the highest priority areas that we found. And then the lighter the shade of the pink gets, the lower the priority was for trail development. And so, you know, we based this priority list on a number of factors: racial and ethnic diversity, what the feasibility score was, the scale of the park's impact, whether it was a regional impact, a community impact, or a neighborhood experience that, you know, provided some high impact for specific neighborhoods, and also what access youth programs had to those potential experiences. And then eventually we laid over a connectivity map. So what were the existing connectivity options, and what were the potential connectivity options to actually link and connect the youth of Omaha to these existing and potential mountain biking experiences. And so really understanding how the community was going to interact with those trails, how they were going to access those trails, and eventually how they were going to use those trails. And so we still have a little bit of work to do to finalize this study. We noticing that the participation in some of the surveys was a little bit low in some of the areas. We're now focusing on making sure that we canvass some of these areas to really get equal representation of respondents for this process, so that we can further refine what that priority list is when we talk about the impacts of mountain biking in the community. And so, Tom, can you see, are we back at the?
Yeah.
Awesome. So this study is going to be available to you. So if you want to use it as an example in your community, to maybe approach your community partners for a feasibility study. We do think that the feasibility study is definitely one of the key places to start, because again, it really takes inventory of what your community has, what is the potential of your community, and where can you make the most impact when you're talking about community growth or ridership growth or whatever challenges it is that your community deems that it should address. So the feasibility process really helps you line up what your priorities are and how you should approach each one of those projects. And so with that, Phil Wadner with NICA is going to talk a little bit about an example that they've worked on in Lebanon, Indiana. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. So Lebanon, Indiana, like Omaha before it, and Alabama before that, also went through a similar feasibility study and specifically held community meetings to gather from their community what types of things folks wanted in their town. And more opportunities for mountain biking and cycling was a common one for them. And so they looked at, how can they create a park designated for cycling, but at the same time, they also launched the new Indiana League. And so as the Indiana League was starting, they recognized that they could utilize this park as a practice venue, but also the Indiana League needed more race venues as well. And so it very quickly became that, this park could be a perfect race venue built up from the ground up for the NICA League. And so like Omaha, they were also thinking about growth. So, we've got this park space. The Indiana League at the moment is pretty small, but as the Indiana League grows, and if it follows typical growth of other NICA leagues, it could easily be seeing 300 to 500 student athletes in a few years. And 10 years from now could be seeing 750 to 1,000 student athletes racing at a single race. And so how do they maintain that that community park while also maintaining a space that's perfect for the NICA League as it is now, and provides an opportunity for space to grow into as that NICA League grows and needs more parking and more infield and different kind of course layout for more student athletes. And so this was a development from Hillride, is the trail developer, and Hillride and Lebanon brought me on board to just provide that NICA perspective, because a lot of our newer leagues don't exactly know what they don't know yet in terms of what are they going to need for growth. So that for a lot more of our experienced leagues, they may prefer to do this themselves, or they can bring myself in too. But we'd be happy to sit down and just talk about looking at the development plans for a bike park, what aspects affect NICA programming, and how can a NICA race event be more successful there. So it's always easier to develop that right into the trail plan rather than later after the trails are built, right? And so in this case, and if you could scroll down a little bit, Anthony, I don't think I have control. Or just a little higher up, I was just gonna center the map there. So in this case, they've planned out enough parking for they've planned out enough asphalt parking for the park, and you can see down in the lower right hand corner there are pump tracks and jumps and kind of a tot track and things that would not be typically used as a NICA venue. And then the course itself has both a green section and a blue section, both of which would probably be getting used for the NICA venue. And then there's also options to cut out the blue if they wanted. And then large amounts of parking, large amounts of infield space, plus room to grow. And they've planned it already into the plan as to how they can develop into having 700 parking spaces down the road. And then also looking at the size of the NICA venue and the size of the league in terms of keeping everything kind of consolidated right now. There's not as many people showing up to a race yet, So they still want the kind of that close-knit community feeling. And then as the league grows, the staging area and the infield and the feed zone, they all have room to grow and to spread out more, so that they can even flip around the start of the race course, so that they get the start and the finish a little bit more separated, so that as the league grows and there's more kids racing, then they have more time to actually spend on the course. So this is just a really great example of how they've developed both a community park that folks can go out and use as a community park 90% of the year. And then it's also going to be a really amazing NICA venue when they get it up off the ground. But this project is, as you can see, it's past the planning phase, and they're in that funding phase right now, looking for funding and hoping to start construction later this year or early 2022. So as you, this webpage is where you can find more information. You can get contact information for Hillred there, or the city engineer, Kevin, for Lebanon. And then if you also have questions about actually the planning process and developing it for a NICA venue, I'm also happy to answer those as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil.
Anthony,
Yes, Tom.
I just want to jump in just real quick here. And that was, you know, in Anniston, that's a big thing that we did. It was when we were looking at, of course, we were fortunate that we had funding and then we planned. But we did bring in Trail Solutions to come in there and to lay out a course. And then we brought NICA in and we redesigned, we made changes to the course after we had local race officials look at it to see what would make best for them. And so it was a give and take, working you know, with the NDA and then with Trail Solutions, and also working with our local NICA league directors and making adjustments to that course so that it would be address what they were looking for. We actually, and the league directors actually made it a little bit tougher than we originally had it, because we were looking at some parameters and certain elevations and pitches and yeah, I can't more emphasize how important it is, if you're looking at doing something like this, to you bring in your NICA people along with your trail planning people and work something together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tom. And so I know that, you know, the process can sometimes seem a little bit overwhelming, but this is the part where we tell you that, you know, that we're here to help. So both IMBA and NICA, we provide you with a variety of tools and resources to help you through this process. Of course, within IMBA, we've got a number of grants and programs that would help you out. There are links to all of these different programs and resources within IMBA that are in this presentation. And when you receive this PDF, feel free to click through to those. One of the most impactful programs that we've had with IMBA in the past few years has been Trail Labs. I had some folks in my community go to Trail Labs, and it's made almost all the difference in the world as far as how motivated the local, community partners within the region were about trails. So Trail Labs is really geared toward land management agencies, community partners like tourism bureaus, economic development councils, chambers of commerce, anybody that's interested in using trails to accomplish their goals locally. Trail Labs is an excellent opportunity to really learn a little bit more in depth about what the process is to create a model trails community. And of course, we have a few grant programs within IMBA that you can definitely take advantage of if you'd like. And again, feel free to click through to those after the webinar and read through them and let us know if you have any questions. Other resources that we have available: planning, design, and construction through Trail Solutions. Tom mentioned that Trail Solutions did work down in Anniston. We do work all around the country. They also help put together the feasibility study that you'll have access to. You can see the link there. And we've got a ton of educational and research resources on the website as well for you to use in your advocacy efforts. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. So before I get into all the resources that NICA has available, Teen Trail Corps is the #1 resource that NICA has for trail groups and leagues trying to get projects like this going. And so Teen Trail Corps is our program within NICA that provides an opportunity and to serve and give their time for the student athletes to give their time to bike related advocacy activities. And it's, as I said before, it's designed to just provide that introduction to the world of advocacy. So our Teen Trail Corps, we have NICA hosted Teen Trail Corps events, but we also strongly encourage leagues and teams to partner with their local trail groups when they're putting on NICA, when they're putting on Teen Trail Corps events. And so they can actually do more when they do partner with a trail group. So like, for example, we limit, we limit Teen Trail Corps activities to just trail maintenance unless they're working in partnership with a trail group who's actually overseeing the construction of new trails and taking on, that instruction and supervision. And in that case, then they can build new trails with that outside group. So there's really two main ways for our student athletes to participate in Teen Trail Corps, one of which is earning awards, and the second of which is tracking service hours. And one of the major differences really is that earning awards is supposed to be student athlete initiated. So they accomplish certain activities and report those activities to their coach, and they apply for their awards based on the activities they've accomplished. And then tracking service hours is really, it's all within our registration system. So the coaches have to kind of initiate it by actually tracking the student athletes' service hours and making sure that those are all just in the system. So first of all, with earning awards, we have 4 tenets: speak, serve, ride, and respect. And for each tenet, there are 5 to 6 available activities, and student athletes just need to earn 4 of those activities to earn that tenet. And then once they earn all 4 tenets, they're eligible for the Teen Trail Corps Captain Award. And then in the near future, we'll also be adding, a near future being, over the next year to 2, we'll be adding hopefully a few more tenets to kind of broaden the Teen Trail Corps award system. But the awards is really about giving riders more ways to count than just racing. So it gives that individual that non-competition based success and recognition that isn't based around racing. And even though NICA was born out of racing, nowadays we're really all about just youth development through cycling. And there's so many NICA programs available now that are just really just about more ways to be involved in cycling and more ways to count on your team. And so it's vital for our leagues as they grow to be showing that they're giving back to the community. And it's vital for our own community. As we all know, when we're putting together volunteer days with our local trail group, what do we expect? Like 10% or less of most mountain bikers to show up to the trail, maintenance events. And so this is our way of trying to change that around. If we introduce that idea of the culture of service to student athletes long before, just as they're growing, just as they're being introduced to mountain biking, hopefully it'll stick around a lot more, and a lot more kids will be passionate about advocacy and trail service. And then just helps communities recognize the economic and the social and physical benefits of improved trails, and the same benefits of student athletes of NICA being in their community. So there is this link here, and on the next slide.
You want this slide or the next one, Phil?
The next one, please.
There you go.
So both the links at the bottom go to the same place. It's our Teen Trail Corps website, where you can find out a lot more information about Teen Trail Corps. And also, it's important to note that after this presentation, we will send the presentation out as a PDF. So all of these links will still be live, and you can access all these resources there. But the second aspect of how student athletes can participate in Teen Trail Corps is our service hours. So we actually just launched our service hour tracking tool in 2019. And we launched it in July. So over about 6 months, we had just over 20,000 hours, pretty close to 21,000 hours performed. And then in 2020, even with the COVID pandemic, obviously we expected to grow more than that since we had only been counting about 6 months worth in 2019. But in 2020, we actually still grew our number of service hours. And a lot of our leagues across the country actually demonstrated and came up with some really creative solutions on how to still, do maintenance, trail maintenance out on the, even with COVID precautions in place. And even like in Maryland, our Teen Trail Corps and our league came up with protocols to keep the volunteers safe that the Maryland state parks then ended up adopting for all of their Teen Trail or all of their service opportunities. And so we had almost 2,800 student athletes participate and just over 1,400 coaches, which is a huge amount of folks performing over 22,000 service hours. And we only expect that to keep growing over time. And so far today, we've had 61 student athletes have earned their Teen Trail Corps Captain Award. And we also expect that to keep taking off and growing every year. So, too far. Other resources that we have available. Obviously, NICA is a little bit different of a type of organization from IMBA. So we don't have a lot of published material out there like IMBA does. So a lot of these resources are things that your league has access to. So if you're in an area that has a NICA league, please work with your league and they can get this information for you. So when you are approaching the school districts to make a team, or you're approaching your community to develop a project, a trails project, and get more trails built. And these are the resources that you can bring to play with through your league. And the first part of that is, of course, just sheer volunteer numbers. With the Teen Trail Corps program and a lot of leagues starting to push the Teen Trail Corps program, and some leagues are even adopting Teen Trail Corps into their league awards. And even one or two leagues are incorporating Teen Trail Corps into their race points. So all of their student athletes have to do a certain amount of service to get certain points in their race overall. And so all of that just brings to play sheer volunteer numbers that your league can bring to trail days and getting projects done. And as they continue going through Teen Trail Corps, they'll also have more and more experience. So they won't just be the typical kids that you often get out to Teen Trail or out to service days, but they'll actually have some knowledge and some experience already coming into it. We also have service hour data. We track through our service hour tracking tool. We can actually see how many specific hours are in each league, and then all the way down from the leagues, we can take out any information from there. We also track localities by zip code and land managers. So if you want to see, just how many service hours NICA kids have done for, say, the National Park Service or the National Forest Service or BLM within your area, we have that data available. And then, as I was talking about with Lebanon, we also have some availability to help you with venue planning, just in terms of here is how these designs would affect a NICA race. And if a NICA race were to be held here, here's the things that they would want to see more of or less of. Or if, as the NICA league grows, here are the things about this venue design that will be more limiting for the league as they grow, which could be, vitally important for designing a really successful venue from the ground up. We also have economic data. That is a link there that you can click on. You want to bring that up, Anthony?
The economic impact data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, dang it. Okay.
That's all right. We can provide a link later.
Yeah.
Make sure that link works.
Definitely check it out later, and I'll make sure that that's opened up to everybody. But basically, we worked with People for Bikes and had a nationwide economic impact survey done on, just how many dollars does a NICA event bring to your local community. And that can be a pretty powerful tool just for especially smaller towns, convincing them that a NICA venue is a good idea. And then I know that People for Bikes and IMBA both have more economic data available in terms of just the local park aspect. And so you can bring those two things together to combine and show what a powerful tool this venue or this park could be for your local community. And then beyond that national study, there are also a few leagues who have done their own studies within usually their own local universities. And I know West Virginia did one early on when we first, I'm based in West Virginia. So we did one with WVU when we were very early. And so that could be a good indicator of just what does an early, a smaller league bring to events. And then I believe that Utah has also done a big one, and Utah is our largest league. So that can be really good in terms of, once a really mature, very large league, as it grows, here's, the type of impact it can have on your community. And that it shows the importance of planning that venue from growth from the very beginning, because we do have a lot of venues that they get started. They're a venue for the first 2 to 3 years of a league, and then the league eventually outgrows it. It just gets too big. And that's what as folks are developing projects, we'd love to help you to plan ahead and not get outgrown. And then lastly, we do have some template documents for leagues who are developing relationships between their local trail groups and school districts. So a lot of times, the leagues have already been working in the school districts, or the teams specifically have often been working in the school districts. And the places that we need more trails are really, beyond just venues. A lot of leagues need more venues, especially as they grow, but also teams specifically need more really small amounts of trail, just really close to their schools to be able to practice from school, not have to drive to practice. And so that can even just be, like a short 1/4 mile trail, 1 mile trail, just something really short that gives kids the opportunity to practice and learn skills on, so that they're ready for bigger practices elsewhere or races elsewhere as well. So as you're looking to develop those relationships and you're looking to just create really small sections of trail, schools are a good place to look at, and your league is going to have the relationships, is often going to have the relationships necessary to develop that relationship with the school. And we do have some documents there to help that relationship process if you'd like. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. So we do have you guys sorted out into working groups to kind of talk about, to really get you thinking kind of high level about your communities. But first, before we do any working group activity, if you have the time, I want to open it up to questions if anyone has any questions. So I know there were a few questions asked in the chat that we were able to answer in the chat. But if anyone else has any questions, you can unmute yourself. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. Robert, I see that you have your hand up for a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'll keep my question really brief, but we are Athens, Ohio. We have the Bailey's Trail System. We're very close to becoming a NICA Trails a race event. I just wondered about a lot of the people that are trying, as you mentioned, funding never stops. And one of the things that would really help us right now is any publicity we could get, or we could show that a lot of riders are coming. And I wondered if you are still doing the IMBA ride centers and possible Epic. We have 80 miles of single track. We're in a really good position to make an application. And people have asked me to ask IMBA if it's possible to get us listed there. Is that still a possibility?
Yeah, so the our destinations program is still active. I don't know what the application period looks like for this year, but we can definitely get that information for you. That doesn't fall under local programs. That's another program within the organization. But yeah, we still do ride center designations. We also still do IMBA Epic designations. And once the application period opens for those, we'll definitely send it out. But we'll give you a heads up, and I'll let you know what that time frame is. I don't know it off the top of my head, but we can definitely get that information for you and send it out.
They it typically opens up in the fall.
Thanks, John. Does anyone else have a question?
I have a question and a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Fred Luna. I'm with Johnny Cycling in Occidental, California. And we're kind of a unique organization in that we have access to around 3,000 acres of private timberland that we develop our trails on. However, we do provide a venue for our local high school mountain bike team. And because they're an after-school club, they're not really sponsored by the high school district. We provide funding, ongoing funding to help them with jerseys and stuff. But our interest and my ask is, how can we utilize your funding sources so we could provide bicycles, grants, those kind of things to support the team, because they are an after-school team with basically a really shoestring budget. And we do what we can, but we don't have the ability to reach out to, bike manufacturers or jersey manufacturers or, parts like, grips or, whatever we can provide just to offset the cost. And also to provide those with low income the ability to be able to, to participate. But again, we do allow the team to train on our property. And what it is, we have a lease with the owner. We do pay dearly for it, but we also provide insurance for our club members. And a lot of the club members' kids are the ones who are on the mountain bike team. So again, we're very unique. We don't do the team. They do use private, public land, public parks, but again, we're just trying to figure out a way that we could utilize funding so we could provide those tools and support so we could get a lot more of the kids involved, low income kids.
Yeah, there are a number of grant opportunities available to do that. I know Specialized has a grant that is centered around youth and getting them equipment. I think Athletic Brewing has a grant program that I believe the deadline is at the end of July. And I want to say that it also is extended to efforts that you're talking about, providing equipment, bikes, that sort of stuff to folks who may not have access to it. So I know that may be available. And there was another community I talked to not too long ago that they got a grant, and now they have quite a few bikes in storage for a youth program. And I can't off the top of my head remember, but if I can I'll check my notes and see, and I can probably connect you with them too, and they could definitely give you some ideas and some guidance on how they approached it and were able to get funding for bikes and helmets and that sort of stuff. We at IMBA don't have a grant program that provides equipment. Most of our grant programs are centered around trails and access. But that doesn't mean that we can't help connect you to some of those other opportunities that provide what you're looking for. And we're happy to do that. And I can follow up after the workshop and connect you with some folks and some opportunities that might help you out. Anyone else have any questions? All right, so we have, John, do we have everybody into groups already?
Yep, we have everyone in there but one.
Okay. So we will launch the meeting rooms, the breakout rooms. So, John, what do we need to do to get them, I guess, open all rooms here?
Yep, we'll open up all rooms here in a second. It's worth taking a quick photo with your phone, maybe of these questions in case you can't see them once you get into the breakout room. That way y'all know what, have some questions to facilitate the conversation. So
Yeah.
give you a second to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So these questions that we have up here, you don't have to restrict yourself to just these questions, but these are some things to consider when you're thinking about what makes the most impact in mountain biking in your community. So, you know, taking pieces from the feasibility study, taking pieces from the McClellan project, taking pieces from the Lebanon, Indiana project, really kind of thinking about, you know, what are the opportunities and challenges and potential partnerships and demographics, like, and, you know, not everybody's going to be within the same community or region, but I think having these discussions and really understanding what those high level questions are that you should ask in order to get to an end product that satisfies the needs of your community. So we'll be kind of going in and out of some of these discussions. So as you guys talk, if you have questions, we're available to answer them. So John, are we good on the rooms?
Yep, we'll launch it.
All right.
So y'all get an invite, just accept it. Looks like we still have one in here. Ernie, if you can hear me, you should have an invite to a breakout room and you have to click accept to get bounced over. Maybe.
So I was able to jump into a few of the meeting rooms. I didn't get to all of them, but some really good discussions happening in those breakout rooms. But definitely wanted to come back and start the recording back just in case anyone needed some contacts. So after we leave this meeting, you may want to contact Phil, Tom, Adam, or myself with questions you have. There will be email links in this presentation that you can click through and email us if you have any questions. But before we wrap things up, everybody feeling good about where we are and any additional questions that we can answer? I see you, Steve Messer. Thanks for showing up, man. Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for taking a little time to go through this presentation, talk a little bit about feasibility studies and how to prioritize work in your community to involve your local NICA teams and to address DE&I issues or challenges that you may see in your community. Also want to thank Phil Wadner, Tom Nelson, and Adam, who last minute said he may or may not be able to make it, but definitely thanks to Adam for providing information for the presentation. Again, if anybody has any questions, we're always here to help, always happy to answer questions and work with you guys. So feel free to email us anytime. We will send out this presentation with next week's IMBA local newsletter. If you don't get that IMBA local newsletter, we will still have an email that will go out to you with a link to this presentation that will have all of the links to everything that we have in here. If you need examples of anything else, we most likely have those examples. But again, thanks everybody for attending, and hope to see you out on the trails. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Great meeting.